The so-called Battle of the Convoys has been covered in some of my previous videos, but today I want to tell you about a single episode of that struggle, the Battle of the Tarigo Convoy, a dramatic and mostly overlooked episode which however had some interesting follow-ups. In the first 3 months of 1941, the transfer of Axis supplies and men to Libya went practically unopposed, with scattered British air and submarine attacks. This flow of men and equipment allowed Rommel to launch his bold advance into Cyrenaica, recapturing Benghazi already on the 4th of April. Pressured by the Prime Minister, who asked to ramp up the attacks against Axis shipping, Admiral Cunningham detached the 14th destroyer flotilla, consisting of the destroyers HMS Jervis, Janus, Nubian and Mohawk, to Malta. Informed by the cryptic German signals, Cunningham was aware that elements of the 15th Panzer Divisions were in transfer from Italy to Libya. The destroyers arrived on the 11th of April and immediately went to the hunt of an Italian convoy sighted earlier by aerial reconnaissance. Their first searches earned no results, but something bigger was on the way. On the 13th of April 1941, a consistent Axis convoy left Naples with destination Tripoli. The merchant ships Sabaudia, Aegina, Iserlohn, Arta and Adana carried men, vehicles and ammunition for the new units of the Africa Corps. They were escorted by the destroyers Luca Tarigo, Baleno and Lampo. Commander Pietro de Cristofaro, on board the Tarigo, was responsible for the whole convoy. Between the 14th and 15th of April, they crossed the Sicilian Channel, but a storm caused the convoy to scatter. The ships lost precious time in regrouping. This meant that the convoy would have sailed during night hours in the dangerous strait closer to Malta, without any air cover. A reconnaissance aircraft based at Malta sighted the ships in the afternoon of the 15th of April, and the 14th destroyer flotilla, led by Captain Philip J. Mack, left Malta at around 1830. Around 1:30 am of the 16th of April, the Tarigo convoy approached the shoals of Kerkena, off the Tunisian coast, while the British destroyers were searching the area for the Italian ships. At 1:40 am, a blip appeared on the radar of HMS Nubian. The Italians were 11 kilometers away and the British moved to intercept them. Mack decided to attack the convoy from behind, having plenty of time to maneuver since the convoy was proceeding at slow speed. At 2:20 am, Mack ordered to open fire when his ships were just 2 kilometers behind the Italians. The destroyers Lampo and Baleno were hit first and reduced to floating wrecks in the space of few minutes. Mack's ships then concentrated on the 5 merchants, which were hit in quick succession. The destroyer Tarigo was not caught in this initial phase, since it was proceeding ahead of the convoy. While a fire hell raged behind the ship, Commander Pietro de Cristofaro immediately ordered to turn to starboard and get in position to launch a counterattack. After the maneuver, the Tarigo ended up between the enemy destroyers and the sinking merchants. At this point, the first salvos landed on the ship, hitting below the bridge, destroying the rudder and the transmission apparatus. Captain de Cristofaro was wounded by splinters and lost a leg, while several other men were killed or severely injured. The ship eventually returned fire against HMS Nubian at few hundred meters distance, causing light damage. The situation on the Tarigo was dire. Some surviving officers activated the aft rudder, bringing the ship closer to the enemy. Fires continued to rage while the main armament was out of action and the crew decimated. Chief Engineer Captain Luca Balzofiore, wounded and blind, was carried by other crew member on the bridge, and died next to Captain de Cristofaro, after reporting that the engine apparatus was no longer operational. The captain, also mortally wounded, refused to abandon ship, and died on the bridge shortly after. A group of survivors, led by Lieutenant Ettore Bisagno, reached the only functioning torpedo tubes left. The torpedo subdirector Adriano Marchetti aimed and launched 3 torpedoes. HMS Mohawk was fatally hit, and the crew soon started to abandon the sinking ship. The Tarigo, now just a burning wreck, sank in the following minutes, with a handful of survivors jumping into the water or on rafts. The Mohawk was scuttled, and soon after, the British destroyers left the area. The next day, the Regia Marina launched a rescue operation to recover the survivors. A little less than 1,300 people were saved from the waters, of which only 36 from the Tarigo, out of a crew of 230 men. Among them there was also Lieutenant Bisagno, who later took part in the operations of the 4th Flotilla MIS in the Black Sea, where he will eventually die in the summer of 1942 on board of a mast boat. 2 gold medals for military valor were issued posthumously, one to Captain De Cristofaro and one to Luca Balsofiore. Ettore Bisagno received the silver medal for military valor. With the destruction of the Tarigo convoy, 1,700 men, 300 vehicles and 3,500 tons of supplies were lost. Undoubtedly, this was a significant blow to the Regia Marina and Axis forces deployed in Libya. However, the overall supply flow did not suffer other major losses until July-August 1941, and Max Squadron was soon withdrawn due to the worsening situation in Greece and, later, Crete. Surprisingly, the destroyer Lampo, which had been hit and put out of action in the early stages of the battle, ran aground on the shoals of Kerkena. The wreck was localized, towed back to Italy, and, after a long period in dry dock in Genoa, the ship returned to service in May 1942. From the interrogation of some survivors of the convoy who reported that an enemy unit had been sunk, Commander Eliso Porta, of the Secret Information Service of the Regia Marina, SIS, imagined that the wreck was lying in shallow waters and that it was possible to inspect it, in the hope of recovering some valuable secret documents. The wreck of the Mohawk was sighted and photographed by reconnaissance aircraft, and between the end of April and the end of July, Commander Porta organized 3 missions on the wreck, also making use of some of the specialized divers of the 10th MIS flotilla, equipped with personal breathing devices. The operation ultimately led to the recovery of some precious documents. Among these, the collection of Admiralty fleet orders from 1936 to 1941, some confidential Admiralty fleet orders of 1941, a code of radiotelegraphic procedure, the fleet tactical orders, the signal manual conduct of the fleet, containing the tactical signals for the conduct of naval operations, further confidential Admiralty fleet orders with classified information on weapons and communication systems, and the Mediterranean station orders, containing the general rules applying to the bases of Malta and Alexandria. Another relevant discovery was a nautical chart indicating the minefields defending the port of Alexandria. This proved to be of great importance since it facilitated the mission of the submarine Shire in December of 1941. The submarine safely transported the human torpedoes of the 10th MIS flotilla closer to the base so that they could launch their famous and successful raid. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I'm sorry if my output of videos, especially in English, is not very high. As always, the sources are in the description. For the time being, I wish you good luck and fair seas, and see you in the next video.